Hello intermediate strings and welcome to our second online virtual open rehearsal. We're here again, you met us all last week and we're delighted to see that over 30 of you have watched our first video on Entrance of the Dragon and we hope you had lots of fun. Today we're going to be looking at Vivaldi's Concerto for Strings in D Major. If you want to YouTube it, you have to write Concerto for Strings in D Major and then you have to write the catalogue number, which is RV121. We're going to tune this tonight. Of Vivaldi's Concerto. Movements, there are 3 movements and that's like a track on the album. So the Concerto is the album and then each movement is the track. But you're young so you don't listen to albums. I'm going to count us in because what I'd like you to do when you watch this for the first time is I'd like you just to listen but follow your music. You'll notice that most of the time we're all playing together in unison. So I'm going to count us in so we all start together. 1 and 2 and 3 and...
Just a word about the cello. I mean, we all know this, but I know from spending time with so many cellists that it's oft done slightly incorrectly. So whenever you've got a pattern, which is, I like to call it do, re, mi, for example. That's the first one, then there's another one later on. The fingering must be 1, 2 located in the spot which the third would normally be at, and then the 4 will flow from that. So make sure, it's a really good opportunity to practice that, and then your teacher won't have to nag you throughout your career.
We're going to go from the beginning one more time. 1, 2, 3. piece of music is in D major. As string players, we really like D major, and it's one of the very first scales that we learn. However, if you are a violinist, when you get to grade 3, which is where all of you should be, you start to learn third position. And we are going to practice third position for violins right now. But if you're a cello or a viola, you're going to practice a D major scale, starting with your first finger on the C string. Violins, we're going to start on the D string, and we're going to need to shift on the A string. You can choose to either start on the G string in third position, or you can practice your shift on the A. I would like us all to start on the open D so that we can practice that shift. So a little bit of a recap for you. You're going to go all the way up to the second finger on the A, and then instead of putting your third finger on the A string for that D, you're going to shift your first finger up to where your third finger would usually be and finish the scale off in third position. So let's try, Mr. K, can we just try up to that shift? And the aim of the game is to get that first finger in tune in third position. I am rubbish at this, so you can all use me as an example of what not to do, so I suggest you look at Mr. K. Guys, why don't you give us the octave below? That would be really nice. So we're just going to do the first octave, and us violins, we're going to practice our shift. Ready? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Intonation, I like to do it without vibrato. I know that it's all really exciting and we've all got in intermediate strings a really great vibrato, but when we're doing scales for intonation purposes, it's really important that we do it without vibrato. So why don't we try the opposite now? Us violins, we're going to start on our high D. That is our fourth finger in third position on the E string, and we're going to practice shifting down, and we're going to stop on the C sharp. Okay, so to get into nice third position, I would put your third finger in first position to start off with on the E, check it's an A with your open A, and then swap it for your first finger, check it's in tune again with your open A string, it's an octave. I told you I was rubbish at it. I didn't practice enough when I was your age. And then you can put your fourth finger down, and it would be a D. Okay, so we're going to go down to that C sharp. We're practicing that shift. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Between a D and a C sharp?
Well, last time I looked, I'm feeling under pressure. I think it might be a semitone.
It's a semitone. And Jordan, when we play upper strings instruments, how would you describe the gap between a semitone? It's slightly different on the viola, I know, but how would you describe it?
There won't be a gap between your fingers. So imagine your fingers are best friends and they want to stay together on the fingerboard.
Fantastic. And cellos, what about you with semitones? Do you have to be careful with semitones?
Well, it's a question of having made the right decision, and I'm sure you will have instinctively used your third finger. It's more a question of using either the third or the second, where it's C natural. But what I would say about when we're doing that, when we're really supporting the violins, aren't we? But it's a great chance to practice that lovely extended position that I spoke about earlier on. I think that's what the cellos would do.
Great.
While they're practicing their shift.
And is there a specific hand position? Because I noticed some of our cellos tend to collapse their fourth finger. Is that a recommended technique?
Well, not really, no. So what one wants to do, play the keynote. Now I won't go into too much detail because there are actually two legitimate ways of doing this, but the more modern way is to simply, almost like a shift, to hop. So the 2 is located where the 3 would ordinarily have been, and then you should be in a great position to simply put the 4th down and support it. Now, the collapsed 4th finger comes if you forget to do the extension. You go 1, and you think, oh great, 3, and then you go, well, that's a disaster. So that's what we're trying to avoid. See what I mean? So if you do extend literally, which another way is to extend to the 2nd, and then sort of roll over like this, then you've got a nice solid 4th finger. But the simpler way, what I know Jan's brother does, for example, is to simply just hop like that, and then you haven't got this unnecessary pivot. But either way, it's got to be a 2nd finger. And it's when you put the 3rd finger down, that's when the 4th finger collapses.
Mr. Knight, this is fabulous. I'm learning so much
Nice.
about cello
It's fantastic.
technique.
World of cello, you see.
So we're going to practice that semitone, and I want you to think now about your tones and your semitones. In 3rd position, in D major, it's really tricky. So we're all going to start on that high D. Cellos, you're going to focus on that lovely technique of hopping and doing all your non-collapsible 4th fingers. And violins, we're really going to tune in now to where those tones and semitones are in 3rd position. This is as much practice for me as it is for you. So let's get into position. We're going to start 3rd finger on the E. Check it with your A. Swap. See, the 2nd time I practiced it, it's already better. Now, do you think that's horrible, isn't it? There, so I told you, can't play in 3rd position. And now we're going to go all the way down and practice that shift to the C sharp, just for me. And we're going to stop on the C sharp and hope that you're all in tune, but do listen to everybody except me. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. We are going to play a 2-octave D major scale. So if you are a cello or a viola, you're going to go back to that 1st finger on the D, just like that. And if you're a violin, you're going to start with an open D, shifting on the A string each time. Thinking back to last week about how we get a really nice legato tone.
One other little thing, sorry, just while we're on this, because it's quite an important subject. When you do your little extension, bring your thumb with you. Because that's another cause. You leave the thumb behind, it's all unsupported, so bring your thumb with you. Okay.
That's the same with violin as well. Ready, and viola. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lovely tone from last week. But of course, there isn't much legato bowing in this piece. Although they're not marked staccato, That's because Vivaldi had to handwrite all of his music, and printing was super duper expensive. And also, he wasn't expecting us to be playing it in 2020. He just thought that they'd rip it up and throw it in the bin and nobody would ever play it again. So probably what Vivaldi did was get his musicians together and say, I want you to play those quavers staccato, and the people would remember it, and then that was it. But we know we have marked staccatos on those quavers. Mr. K, how do we play staccato and bouncy on the violin?
The most important thing is where you try and do it in the bow. And it has to be around this place, which is called the balance point.
Oh, I love doing this. Can we all find our balance point? We did this in rehearsals. My bow is terribly warped, so it moves frequently, dependent upon the weather.
Found it. Now, so that's where you're, in general, going to aim. But this is not a very fast bounce. So you would probably be aiming to have about a centimetre below that place for the place where you bounce. Second most important thing is the tilt of the bow hair. Because if you have a flat bow hair, it sounds as if you're crushing the instrument to death. But if you tilt the bow hair like that, it gives way. And the third most important thing is the elevation of your right arm. So you have to be above the level of the string, so that the bottom of your string is the string, not your arm below the level of the string. When it'll sound like that. So the elevation of your right arm tilted the bow and around the balance point.
Lovely. And Mr. Knight, obviously lower strings, they're slightly different, aren't they? They're a little bit quirky.
Well, I would follow all of that advice exactly the same. I usually think the definition of an off the string stroke is to actually start off, because you need some energy from somewhere. If you're going to drop a ball, for example, and expect it to bounce up again, you'd have to, you wouldn't start it from there, would you? You'd start off and you'd drop it and then it would bounce up. So I'd start off. But otherwise I'd do it exactly like again.
Fantastic. Fantastic. What we're going to do now is, Jordan, what do we call this? Bowings have lots of special names, don't they? And part of being a string player isn't just doing the bowings, but it's knowing this special vocabulary. Jordan, what do we call this style of bowing?
So this articulated stroke we would call spiccato.
Spiccato. Spiccato plays staccato. Who would have known? So we're going to go back to our D major scale, and we're going to do 4 spiccato quavers per note. And we're focusing on these lovely bouncy bows.
So start with your bow about a centimetre or so above the string, just above that balance point. That's where it might be a bit different. So Anne says a centimetre, and the cello, you might want to just risk dropping it from a tiny bit more than a centimetre. That's might be the only time when it's different.
Lovely. So quavers, I will count in quavers so that you can join in. 3 and 4 at E, semitone, coming up, semitone again, you are expert at your off-the-string playing, and we're going to play in canon. I wonder, can you remember what playing in canon means? That's right. One person starts, and then another person starts with the same thing, but a little bit later. It's also the same vocabulary for dance. So if you do dance at school, you'll also talk about canon in choreography. We're going to do a 3-part canon. Cellos, you're going to play with Mr. Knight, and Mr. Knight is going to play 8 quavers. He's going to play D, 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 E, 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 E. And when the cellos have played 8 quavers, then the violas are going to come in. Actually, I'm going to sit this one out and I'm just going to listen. And then when the violas have played their 8 quavers, violins, you are going to come in. I tell you what, I'll count you in, and we're going to do it a little bit more speedy. I'll count you in quavers. Ready? 3 and 4 and. Violas. Violins. And I would like you to play 2 more rounds of spiccato bowed scales. And then when you come back, we're going to show you some fun warm-ups that you can do to help with your wrist. Welcome back. We are going to show you some fun games that you can do to release the tension in your wrist. Because if you have a really tense wrist and you are gripping your bow, I know we call it a bow hold, but we don't actually hold our bow. The bow just kind of sits in our hand. So if you are gripping your bow, you ain't going to be able to do a bouncy bow. So we're going to play a game. You had a good name for this, Mr. Knight. What did you call it?
I call it the monkey race.
The monkey race.
I call it the monkey climb.
Monkey climb then, that's it.
Ah, who wants to, out of all 4 of us, who will explain this game the clearest?
I used to do it, putting a little, what they
Called a hula hoop. If I
Hula
remember
hoop.
right.
Hula hoop on the top of the
Yeah,
bow,
fantastic.
and you could eat it. If you got back to the bottom, you could eat the hula hoop.
Oh, I want to do that, or Haribo.
Well, yeah. But the aim, it's dead easy getting up there. In fact, most people just let it drop. It's coming back and not swivelling around. This is where you have to move, and you have to be on the tip of your thumb so that you control that. And try and keep the little finger so that it keeps on the top of the bow, so it's a nice curved shape as you're coming down. We used to have races.
We're going to have a race now.
You will notice, cellists, I'm talking to all my pupils about this very subject at the moment, and you'll notice that when you are coming down, you've got to lift your thumb up. You've got to slide it along at the very least, and it will not come off there unless you bend it. It will naturally bend, and of course that's the position we're looking for, is this bent thumb, because that's the tensor up, the number 1 tensor up of the bow hold, is the thumb, because there's somebody deep inside your subconscious saying, don't drop the bow, don't drop the bow. So you go like this, but don't worry about that, you never will drop it, and bend the thumb, go ahead and bend the thumb. Sorry.
That's a good point, a bendy thumb. That is something that is in common with all of our strings here. Jordan?
I think we should try and call it a round thumb.
Okay.
So we've got very nice soft fingers. We've got a nice ballerina ballerina for our fourth finger, and there should be a nice tunnel here. Nice circle.
Okay, me and Mr. K are going to have a race. So,
Well, go on.
because I was going to say we're all going to have a race, but of course if we have a race, Mr. Knight naturally will come first, not because he's the best, but because his bow is the shortest.
bow.
And then Jordan will come second, and then I will definitely come last. So if I come last out of two, I don't really mind. So, aim of the game, you're going to do it with us. You might have a race with us and see where you come. Okay, so you start in your bow hold, and you keep your bow hold. The idea is that you keep your bow hold, and you're going to go all the way up and all the way down. Who's going to say ready, steady, go?
Ready, steady, go!
By a centimetre.
Woohoo!
It was very close.
So that's what I'd like you to do. And you can do that sitting watching YouTube. You can do it with TikTok in one hand and a bow in the other. You can just, it takes no effort at all, and it's a really, really great thing to do. And when your parents say, why aren't you practicing? You can say, actually, you're practicing your technique. Okay, wonderful. We're going to go from the beginning now, and you're going to play with us. And we're going to look at these terrace dynamics. In the Baroque period, it means you go from very loud to very quiet because harpsichords couldn't do crescendos and diminuendos. That's one of the reasons. Okay, so we start off forte and then with piano, etc, etc, etc. And guys, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take it up to about bar 23, that cadence at the end of that first opening theme. And again, I'll count us in so that you can play in time with us. I've got sticky fingers now.
This is why I don't like that game.
1 and 2 and 3 and... a little bit. Generally speaking, if you have a crotchet, I would like it to be long. I would write, if you haven't done so because we did it in rehearsals, a line, it's called a tenuto, over the crotchet, and they will remind you that they are long. You will see that usually when you have one crotchet in a bar, it is followed by 2 crotchet rests. That is your reminder in this opening that if you need to do a retake to get back to the down bow, please do so. All of those phrases must start on a down bow.
And
Jordan.
when you do your retake, make sure you go back to the right place of the bow for your off the string string.
Fantastic. And Jordan, can you remind us where is that place in the bow?
So as Mr. K said, we were going to find our balance point, and probably for this speed, we're going to be about a centimetre towards the frog.
Fantastic. We're going to zoom along now, and we're going to have a little look at a different style of bowing. We're all going to go to bar 44. Can we all go to bar 44? First of all, watch us and see if you can see what the change of bow stroke is. This is bar 44. It starts forte, and I'm going to count us in quavers. 1 and 2 and 3 and... And stop right there. Fantastic. Did you get that change of bowing at around 52? Mr. Knight kicks it off really beautifully, and he has the downbeat and in and the violas. How can I forget the violas? Because what we have to think about is something called a hierarchy of the bar, where the first beat of the bar is the most important, particularly in 3-time. Mr. Knight and Jordan, how were you playing that stroke? Because you weren't playing, it wasn't accented, but it was important. How did you make it sound important but gentle all at the same time?
Gosh, do you know, I sort of just did it. I didn't I mean, in Vivaldi's day, I mean, we've got modern instruments. I get, well, actually, the cello is not all that long after Vivaldi's day, but it has been modernised, of course, and the bow is a modern bow. But what Vivaldi's bow would not have done is, as Georgina just demonstrated, oh, he didn't do it very well. Can you hear that at the beginning? That's generally a good thing to train yourself to be able to do, but I consciously didn't do that. I just dragged it naturally. That's what I did.
Fantastic.
That might be the right answer.
No, that's great. Nice and light. Now, Mr. K and I, we are playing somewhere very different in the bow. Mr. K, could we just play from beat 2 in bar 52? And what I would really like the violins to look at is where in the bow we are playing. Mr. K, are we starting on an up bow here?
Yep.
Lovely. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, rest. Okay, so Mr. K, where were you playing in the bow?
Upper half, but really quite near the point.
In the upper half. So that's the only time in this piece where you play in the upper half. I want you to listen again as we play it tutti. That means all together. We're doing something special with the dynamics. What are we doing? Can we all please go from the very beginning of bar 52, please? I'll count us in. 1, 2, 3. Did you see what we did with that bowing, with those dynamics? That's right, we did an echo. Although terribly cliched, it works very well in this part. So we are piano, but at bar 55, can you write a pianissimo? That means PP. Later on in this video, I'm going to go through the fingering for the violin section because there are lots of diminished fifths that you can't play with the same finger across the string, but I will go through those at the end of the video. Violins and violas, every time you have this diminished fifth pattern where it's a G and then a C sharp, you can't do 3-3 across the string because you'll get a perfect fifth. Instead, you have to use your third finger for the G and then your fourth finger for the C sharp on the G string. Please write that fingering in. Similarly here at bar 70 for the violins and the violas, here's another one of those tricky intervals. You need to put your third finger on the D, but in order to play the G sharp, you need to play the G sharp with your fourth finger. Looking ahead in the next few bars, an E sharp is an F natural.